That's me. When Nelu was giving you that little intro, I was afraid she was going to start talking about that picture. Because interestingly enough, that picture is about 10 years old as of 2 weeks ago, actually. That picture is from the very first conference that we held here in Miami in October 2013. It was October 23rd, if I remember correctly. Um, and you can notice there's more hair but less beard, you know, more hair but less beard back in the day. So I thought she was going to show some old pictures of me with more hair and so forth, you know. So a little embarrassment there. Anyway, so getting on with it. The topic of today is Kanban policies, or rather, a polite policy conversation, as I'm calling it. I'm not going to introduce myself more because she already said a mouthful. Some of you guys know me already, probably have seen me on LinkedIn, heard me squawk about things on LinkedIn. So I want to see if I can engage everyone in a polite conversation. Okay, a polite conversation. So I want to kind of get a feel for the folks in the room. Okay, using your reactions on Zoom, please. Your reactions on Zoom. Uh, who prefers Miro? Well, let me put it this way. Okay, I can ask this question: when you hear the word policy, what do you think of? And if I asked you to join me here on Miro, who's game to join me here on Miro? We can have the conversation via voice, but who's game to join me on Miro? I need a few people to join me on Miro. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I see some hands. I see some hands coming up. I see some hands coming up. Okay, good. I will generate a link that you guys can access, and I will put that in the chat. Hang on a second. Let me move that out of the way so nobody sees that. Let me put that in the chat. There you go. And that is the link to the Miro board. And Nelu, if you would be so kind as to hang on to that link so that when folks join me, fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to, as you guys pile in, I'm going to bring everybody to me. I'm going to bring everybody to me. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, and I'm going to share the screen again. For some reason, it took it away. So I'm sharing the screen regardless. Nelu, is there some reason why? Are you guys able to see what I'm sharing?
We can see when you hear the word policy, what do you think of? What comes?
Okay, you guys can see that. Okay, awesome. I just wanted to be sure because I thought I was having to re-show it. Okay, so let's kick this off for a minute, and using some stickies because obviously in Miro you're never going to run out of stickies. Grab a sticky or two and answer the question. When you hear the word policy, what do you think of? What comes to mind? Let's put a little timer here of a couple of minutes. Okay, I'm running the timer. And please be kind with each other and size your stickies accordingly so that everybody's ideas can sit inside of that frame. Yeah. When you hear the word policy, what do you think of? What do you think of? All right. Excellent. And then we're going to try a couple of little exercises on the basis of that and get you guys thinking in terms of policies. Interesting. Interesting, interesting. I see some folks having some fun with it, and that's always great. Okay. Fantastic. I know we've got 17 folks on this, 18 folks on this Miro board. And I'm not seeing 18 stickies yet, so I'm challenging you. You got 42 seconds to come on in here and and tell me when you hear the word policy, what do you think? Good, bad, scary? I know Halloween's over, but what do you think? Ooh, nice. I see some folks going old school here. All right. Well, time's technically up, but somebody's still typing in their sticky. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Type it up real quick. Whatever you got in your mind there, just put it out there. Ooh, somebody brought up the law. Well, okay. We'll see about that. We'll see about that. So let's take a look about this for a second here. Do you guys see any repetition in what's out there? Just curious. And I'm opening the floor up to anybody. Do you see any repetition here? What do you guys think?
Do what you're told.
Do what you're told. Interesting.
Rules.
Rules.
Rules. Okay, a whole lot of rules. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when
You got compliance, follow.
Compliance, I see a lot of copies of that. Okay.
Yep. Following, same thing.
Okay.
Agreement in some ways.
Agreement. Oh, okay. Well, there's a little hope there, right? Agreement.
Guidelines.
Guidelines. Awesome. All right. Yeah. I'll tell you though, one sticky in particular, and I'm gonna out the person, and hopefully they're taking my outing them respectfully. But there's one sticky there in particular that grabs my attention. Okay, there's one sticky there that grabs my attention. So with your permission, and I apologize because we're about to do something very, very quick. You ready? Okay. Whoever wrote that sticky, would you mind unmuting yourself if you're muted and tell me what motivated you writing that, if you don't mind?
Which sticky?
The sticky that's in the main window right now in the Zoom.
Oh.
So decision library is the one you're looking at.
Correct.
That's one I wrote.
Alan, you said you were going to behave.
I'm sorry, I was supposed to.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I love Alan to bits. But he's spoiler alerting you guys just a tiny bit.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He's on to something. Okay? Because if you look at it this way, okay, rules, guidelines, best practices, guardrails, policing things, compliance, okay, all these things involve how we decide things.
Mm-hmm.
If you stop and think about it for a second, all these things have to do with how we decide things. Some of these phrases regarding policy come across as, and I actually heard it in some people's how they voiced it, sounded a bit impositional, didn't it? Some policies are somewhat impositional, if not outright impositional, right? Yes? No? Signs of life. Yeah. Yes. Impositional.
Indeed.
Okay. Go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you. That's all.
No worries. I don't mind it, and I don't mind disagreement either. That's good. That's good. And so thinking about it from the position of, well, what is it about policies that kind of rubs us a little negatively? Okay. Usually it's because of the impositional nature of policies. Okay. And that's true with many things. There's things that we have to deal with, which are all part of, working in polite society, and I'll use a street metaphor that I hope everybody is going to be familiar with to kind of shift the thinking about this, policy thinking for a little bit before we jump into the Kanban policy of it. If you guys can see this, okay, I'm going to share it now. Share a different screen. Okay. If you were to look at this and interpret this from what you know, okay, just from what you know, and I were to ask you, well, what's the policy here? Can somebody spot the policy here?
Well, from what I hear in Minnesota, they will all stay there until the cows come home.
That's great. I love it. Okay. Now, mind you, if someone from Miami were to have answered that question, Thomas, the person from Miami would have said, well, the answer is obvious, Thomas. Everybody enters the intersection at the same time. That would have been the Miami answer.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah. I'm sure that every municipality has a different answer for that. Okay. But the answer is obvious. We're all at an intersection. We've got a stop sign. The policy is we wait for whoever was first to go, and then we kind of go from there. Okay.
And then we all move at the same time.
Precisely.
And I'm in Miami.
Only in Miami. Only in Miami. Okay.
See, there's data missing though. We don't know if this is on a Monday morning or a Saturday night. I mean, different answers.
Exactly.
Very true.
24
Very
hours,
true.
7 days a week.
Very true. And by the way, hold on to that thought because it might come up later. It might come up later. All right. Let's look at this one. What's the policy here? You're there and you see this. What's the policy? Look at the arrow. What's the policy for that?
Don't stop.
Don't stop. Okay. Don't stop. Go directly to go collect your insurance. Okay. For those, maybe I've been zooming in enough. The arrow is pointing at the red light. So the answer is obvious. The policy is you wait until the thing is green. Okay. Obviously a policy. Try another one. Okay. You see it pointing there. What's the policy here?
Go
What do you
faster.
think? Go fast.
That's what I was about to say.
Usually, yeah, exactly. It says you see this. Yeah,
Go faster, for sure.
Go faster, right?
Yeah.
Usually the answer is, well, officer, the street light was orange. Is what I've heard too as an excuse. It wasn't red, it was orange. Okay. All right. Indulge me again. You see this one. What's the policy there?
In St. Pete, it stopped because you're just not paying attention.
You're above speed limits.
Yeah. Okay.
Free falling.
Free falling. It's free for all. Do what you want. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say rude things towards that car that they won't actually hear, but
totally understandable, Thomas. I believe you're probably well within your right to say things privately at that case. Yeah. The answer is yes. Go ahead,
from
Bob.
this, we can't tell if that car is immobile or not. If that car is immobile, then we will go around it with caution. If it's moving, then
there's always one, people.
Couldn't tell that.
There's always one.
no, that's a really good point. If it's immobile, then
Correct.
maybe
But-
check and see if the person's okay.
Absolutely true. That's probably the most empathetic thing to do. The answer in this case, most traffic laws anyways, is you're able to proceed if the path forward is open to you. Okay?
That car's the one that went fast on the yellow.
That's right. They went fast on a yellow. In Miami, and I have seen this in Miami. Usually, this person would have done that. You
yeah,
guys
but
see
they
the
didn't
laser
go
pointer?
fast on the yellow because they had the green because they're making a left-hand it looks like they're making a left-hand turn going in
Correct.
the opposite direction. So they didn't have the yellow. They had the green like you have.
Like I said, Bob, officer, it was orange. It was orange. It
Yeah,
was
but
orange
it's
when I
green.
turned. It was
It's
orange.
it's
when I turned
green.
here. Well, yeah, but facing you, not necessarily facing them.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
we're going calm, and since we don't know, we have to assume it's a normal traffic light, which is green going the same, opposite directions.
True.
So you're having us make some assumptions, and then you're shooting them down.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is that we're all faced with policies all the time. Some which we think through, some which we're already accustomed to just take on by second nature. Why? Because we've already ingrained them enough. We've already built in the policy into our internal decision-making system. Okay? In other words, we've established habits off of understanding the nature of certain policies to build them into our decision-making system. Okay? Day to day. Hold on to that thought because it's part of what we're going to talk about next. Okay? So before I get into more concrete stuff about policies, okay, I want to talk a little bit about some groundwork. Let's get some fundamentals out of the way here. And what do I mean by fundamentals? I want to get to the fundamentals about what is and is not Kanban. Okay? Very, very simple. Okay? So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about this and let you guys question it and let you, sass back a little bit if you want. That's totally cool. But for better or for worse, here's 3 common things about what Kanban is not. Okay? Kanban is not about moving stickies on a board. Okay? Another common misconception about Kanban, it's something our operational folks do. Okay? And another common misconception and dysfunction I've seen is folks trying to apply this to manage people via busyness. I want to see where all the drones are, yeah? So I want to be able to see where everybody's working at every time, at every moment of the day. So I want to have a Kanban so I can manage people, okay? Kanban is not about managing people, okay? So question. Anybody here have any questions about what they think is or is not Kanban? And I open the floor to everyone because I see some people that I have a sneaking suspicion are in fact experienced with Kanban of different sorts. So don't make me out you, please. Speak up. Any questions about you that you may or may not be sure about what Kanban is or isn't before we move forward? Open forum. Don't wait for somebody to speak. Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with Kanban to not be sure what it is.
Totally understandable. Okay. I'm going to give you a concise and brief definition. It's Marcelo's definition, by the way. It's not the definition in the Kanban guide. Okay. So I'll just lay it out in front of you. Okay. It's really simple. Kanban is about seeing, discerning, and managing the work. It's not about managing the people. It's about seeing, discerning, and managing the work. Okay. The Kanban method itself, because there's some folks that have a different perspective on Kanban, and that's all right. Okay. The Kanban method, which is what I'm going to be referring to for the remainder of this conversation, is a set of principles and practices. I'm not going to dig into the entire Kanban method here. That's a lot longer conversation. Maybe we'll have a session on that another time. Okay. But the idea behind it is to help teams and organizations do precisely that. It helps them see the system of the things that they're working on. In other words, I may be working on something, okay, which Dr. V over there is going to consume the outcome of whatever I generate because he's the one working directly with the customer, okay? But in a sense, Dr. V is my customer and I'm here to serve his needs or his team's needs, okay? And we have to be able to coordinate our activities together. Why? Because the things that we do are interconnected. Okay. And so when I can see those things that affect the two of us, I can discern how to better address the needs of him who is my customer. How? By managing my work myself, okay, and being able to give the people that I work with a way of organizing themselves to make better decisions, okay, around how we serve Dr. V's customer, okay, and vice versa, okay, because this is a collaborative environment. It's a system of interconnected activities, okay. That's a very high level view, okay, of the Kanban method, very high level view, okay. But I am going to introduce you to the practices of Kanban. And as you notice, there's things that are tied to that statement I just made, which is to be able to see everything. And we're going to see a whole heck of a lot. I'm sure that some of you are roaming around this mural board already, looking at things that I've laid out there. So you're seeing a whole bunch of things. All right. So visualize what you're doing. Another practice is to limit the work in progress. In other words, constrain yourself. Put some habits around how much work you're paying attention to at any given time and help you focus with it. Okay? Why? So you can manage the flow of the work itself. In other words, allow you to self-organize around the work. Okay. I'm going to skip the one with the arrow pointing to it because that's the topic of this conversation today. So I'll go to the next one, which is to implement some feedback loops. In other words, periodically go back and assess how things are working from different perspectives, look at things from a different, point of view and say, how's it going? And then make more sense of the system of activities, okay, to make better decisions on what you do. And last but not least, promote everybody working collaboratively, okay? If you find out that something in your interactions that say something's not working too well between my team and Dr. V's team, hey, let's look at it collaboratively and come up with some sort of experiment, if you will, that helps the individuals and interactions talk to each other people better. Okay? That way you can see what's going on between you and if it's working or not. So going back to the one that I skipped, okay, notice how that's worded. Make policies explicit. So I want to, for a moment, ask you guys a question. Okay, what would be so important about being explicit? It's kind of like the importance of being earnest. What's so important about being explicit? Open floor.
Remove ambiguity.
Removes ambiguity. Love it, Jason. Anybody else?
Alignment.
Alignment. I love it. Alignment. That's right. We both are in sync as to our understanding. I love it. Anybody else? I'd like to hear a third opinion.
Promotes
Visible-
common understanding.
Yeah.
Promotes common understanding. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Dr. V, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, visible to everybody.
It's visible to everybody. That's right. It's like Martha and the Vandellas. There's nowhere to run to. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
Transparency.
Absolutely. It's transparency. It should be clear to everybody. Excellent. Excellent.
It proves you're not a lawyer.
It proves you're not. Okay.
It minimizes waste.
I'm sorry. What was that, Lydia? Say that one more time.
That Kanban is supposed to minimize waste.
It minimizes it. Okay. I can see. Yeah. Making your policies explicit helps you make sure that you're not paying attention to things that you don't need to. So you're minimizing waste.
Exactly.
I like it. Fantastic.
Accountability.
That's fantastic. Accountability. That's very important. Everybody can be on the same page. So let's look at some examples. Okay. And these might not be new to some folks. You may have heard of these things. Okay. Policies, especially making them explicit, okay, involve having everybody be able to agree to what they are making them accessible and visible to everyone involved.
Yep.
Okay, everyone involved. Okay, going through them. Okay, and explicitly, because we're going to see an example of this sort of stuff, is this concept of pull criteria. And that goes back to my buddy Alan, who is MIA at the moment, said decision library. Okay, because Kanban systems, okay, are what are called pull systems. In other words, when there is availability of capacity and a desire, okay, to work on something or to move something or something needs the team's attention, okay, it should be well understood if that particular item can be pulled forward into the workflow and acted upon. Okay, so in a sense, it's a decision library for, do I take something and act upon it? Okay, I'm going to pause there for a second. Any question about what I just said? Any question about what I just said? Kind of like entering the intersection. Do I go into the intersection or not? Kind of like that. Okay. Another aspect of policies are this concept of whip limits. A whip limit is an explicit policy, okay, on how much something is given capacity. Okay. It is an explicit control on a Kanban system, right? The next, and this is kind of somewhat unique to the Kanban method, is this idea of classes of service. Now, there's different points of view with regards to this topic, but the fact is, some things at some point or another, even if they're very similar, okay, may demand or may benefit from applying a different level of attention. I don't mean priority, I mean importance, okay? And I'm sure that all of you have experienced this at one time or another. Has anybody ever sent anything through UPS or FedEx?
Yeah.
An important legal document, perhaps? Okay. Where do you think the phrase, it absolutely positively has to be there overnight, came from?
Facts.
Exactly, FedEx. Okay. That is an expression of a class of service. Okay. It demands different kind of attention. It might not be any more important to the overall environment that that document be sent overnight, but it is to you as the customer. Okay. And you working on it, if you recognize that the customer has placed that class of importance, okay, it behooves you on you to be able to make a policy around that, to be able to give it a different kind of attention. So a class of services, like giving a different kind of attention to something you may be working on. Okay.
May I ask a question?
Yes, of course, at any time.
Okay. So when you're talking about classes of service, would this be something like, so in one lane I have, or in one column I have one type of ticket, and I may have that same type of ticket in a different column, but the different column, the second column, is actually more important because it's later in the process, and so it's about ready for production. So I should go ahead and deal with that second column before I deal with the first column?
Possibly.
Okay.
Possibly. Okay. And I'll explain why. Because if it has a hard due date, for example, and by the way, you're kind of knocking at the door of something that you'll see in a few minutes, okay, and they're both ready to be moved into production, but one is closer to a due date, okay, or if a customer is more prepared to accept that thing that is ready to go into production, okay, that may apply a different class of service for you to give it attention. Does that make sense, Thomas?
Yes. Sorry.
Awesome. No worries. I'm pulling for confirmation or for further questions. That's why I put that out there. Okay.
Coach, can you talk a little bit how class of service is not the same as priority?
Okay. Class of services is different than a priority, because a priority is usually it is a statement of our, I'm not going to say guesstimate, but it's our feeling for need. Okay, a class of service is first and foremost tied to customer. Okay, now, mind you, here's the thing about priorities. Okay, we often conflate priority with desire, and primarily our desire. Okay, and so prioritization usually ends up getting conflated with need. Okay, and class of service is about need of the customer. If the customer expresses a need that elevates something above something else, attention wise, okay, that's not a statement of priority. Okay, we might still have to, redo something sooner than later, but our customer has expressed the need. Okay, and we're responding to the needs of the customer. Okay, and so class of service differentiates that way. Go.
So then an example of of that might be the having an expedite swim lane to deal with critical production incidents.
Yes, that's one particular thing. Okay, it might also be if, and I'll give you an example. Okay, in my case, I back in the day I was working with medical devices. We had an inquiry from the FDA, and it needed a turnaround time. Okay, that was a different class of service because, let's be honest, you've got a regulatory agency, you pay attention to them. Okay, especially if it's an inquiry on something that you had already submitted for approval, for example. In other words, it's holding you back if you don't respond to that customer of yours, the FDA in a sense, and in a roundabout sense, okay, with their inquiry. So we had to stop some high priority development to respond to the FDA request so that they could go ahead and process the approval for us to be able to ship an instrument. Does that make sense, Craig?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Last but not least, before I move on, dependencies and blocker handling. Okay. If you've ever had a dependency upon somebody else, has it ever happened to you that your team wasn't sure what to do about it? Has that ever happened to anybody? You had a dependency, but they weren't sure what to do about it and when they needed to do something about it? That's never happened to anybody? Good for you. Good for you.
Do you mean that happens every day?
Every day. See, thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Do you mean that the dependency isn't being met and then they're sort of blocked and they are not sure how to proceed? Is that what you meant?
The dependency is something that they depend on, but they're not sure how to engage with it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's one expression of dependency. Okay, there could be many others. Okay, but the one I just expressed is one that typically happens with a lot of teams. They encounter dependency, some subject matter expert, okay, and they pause and they'll stop and they're not really sure how to go about proceeding. Okay, so having an explicit policy on when you encounter a dependency outside of the team for so-and-so subject matter expert, okay, what should I do about it? Okay, I've talked about this thing called dependency busters, okay, which was no different than effectively a fancy racy matrix for the team to tell them that if they needed to go see the DBA for this particular type of area in their back-end system, okay, this was the person to normally talk to for answers. If they had an issue, who their manager was, how long you wanted to wait before letting that person respond back to you before you wanted to escalate, and so on. What I've just detailed is an explicit policy for how to deal with a dependency for a subject matter expert outside of the team. And I would actually sit with the team and explain to them, please detail who you typically have to interact with outside of the team when you don't have all the answers for certain types of work. Is that making sense to you folks? Do you guys? Is that making sense? And we'd actually make a table of these people. Okay. And that way, whenever they encountered an item that said, oh, shoot, I've got to go see Heydrich because he's the master in this particular type of prompt. Okay. And I'm not really sure how to put together a type of prompt for this sort of thing that I need him to generate some stuff for a chatbot that we're building. Okay. They know how to bust that dependency. Why? Because we created an explicit policy table. Okay. And so the team does not have to wait. They can go directly to Go, get their answers from Dr. V. Okay. All right. And so that's another expression of explicit policies. All right. But let's look at what's good enough. Because this is why when Alan put up his sticky, I was like, oh, he spoiler alerted it. Okay. Because here's the trick to policies. Okay. What is good enough information for you to make a good pull decision? Okay. Do I act upon this or not? Okay. Do I act upon this or not? What is good enough information for you to make a good pull decision? In other words, it's what Alan gave you guys the answer to the test. It's a decision library. Okay. It's a decision library. Well, let's look at an example. Yeah. Boom. It's a pretty big example. Okay. It's an example of a Kanban board. Okay. And on top of that Kanban board, okay, and I've taken the liberty of somewhat breaking down some of them. Some of them are examples. Some of them are what that Kanban picture says. Okay. And explicitly, the policies that I have listed are effectively these things. And yes, I'm annotating on the Zoom. But I've taken liberty and placed some myself. And you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, Marcelo, there's more than one explicit policy here in this section. Yeah, there's multiple. Okay. You see how when they're going into story breakdown, before they even start breaking it down, here they've got a policy. Hey, are we going to get paid for this, Jason? Joel, do we have a SME rep with the customer that we can ask questions? Okay, who's the business line person that we can interface with? Okay, these are explicit policies. Why? Because when the team needs to make a decision, okay, they have a list of the questions at least that they know they need to be using to ask to be able to solve the question of, do I pull it or not? I'm going to pause there for a second. How is this striking you guys?
I just hit a lack of that policy today.
It happens to the best of us, Joel.
I was going to say that feels a little bit like a definition already.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Interesting. Yeah. Good. Because it kind of is. Am I ready to pull, Jason?
Yeah.
Am I good to pull? Okay. Another one here, because we've gone in through story breakdown, but I'm ready to pull it into my formal backlog. So, hey, have we sliced it to a comfortable size? Have we assessed if it's valuable to the customer? Have we assessed if it's valuable to the business line? In other words, once I have it in my backlog and I'm committing to doing it, do I really have enough information to decide to even start working on it? Another policy, okay? Are the right team members available? In this case, can they pair up? Okay? Are they able to pair? Another policy, okay? Before, after, rather, because let's say here, they've broken down their development into stages. It's all in development, Joel. If it's 0 to 50%, it was in the coder and designer's hands. Okay, or rather the designer's hands. If it's 50 to 90%, it's in software development. If it's in 90%, yep, that thing's ready to go through the QA and send off to UAT. Okay, so they decided to break it off in those sections, but to say whether it's in any one of those sections, they've got these different policies along the way. And as they're getting ready down to the very end where they're able to be deployed, they're saying, hey, have we cleared UAT? Do we have documentation? Okay. Is the customer system even available to be able to migrate onto them? Okay. Can we deploy it onto their system? And then because the finance people must be served, do we have a software bill of materials so we can send the invoice to somebody? Because everybody would like to get paid, I'm sure. Yeah. Who here likes to get paid? Okay. It's an interesting policy to put on your Kanban system. Have we generated something that can be sent to finance? Do we have a CapEx, OpEx report for the project managers in the room? I got you back. Do we have a CapEx, OpEx report? Okay, I know there's some project managers in here. Okay. Here's a different example altogether. We're going to zoom into this thing. Boom. So I have to zoom out a little bit. Let's look at this story. Okay. Let's play a little game of spot the policy. Okay. Can anybody tell me, okay, a policy that you see on this story? What's a policy? Anybody?
We have to have acceptance criteria.
Oh, okay. There's a policy. All right. Anything else?
I mean, it looks like you've got your contacts established, your subject matter experts.
Okay. All right. There's a policy. Very good.
That each story has a title and a description, such as I want, so that.
Okay, sure. No problemo.
I'm intrigued by the X next to legacy versus platform.
Ah, very interesting. Yeah. Have we defined, okay, an area for this thing? Okay. In other words, have I explicitly made visible if this story involves dealing with legacy code, and in this case, a new platform that we're building? You guys, does that resonate for anybody? So I've literally encoded into the work item itself a policy to tell the developer, oh, you got to go into Joel's voodoo black magic code. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
The spaghetti code.
I didn't cast that aspersion. Okay. So I got another question. Okay. What about
with this one is it looks like development isn't required.
That's very astute of you. You're right.
Well, but you have a QA right there. I mean,
yeah. What if this was?
Yeah, but QA can assess quality of the documentation.
It doesn't say anything.
Yeah. Yeah. What if this involves actually documenting the voodoo black magic code.
Yep.
What if this story is about we no longer want to have to go into the dark forest. We actually want to generate something that makes it safer for the developers to go in there. So we're going to throw some designers, some of the tech writers and the QA folks to make sure that legacy code is adequately documented.
A lot like a spike.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, but you're not researching something new. You're researching something old or existing in this case.
I like old better.
And you don't need developers because you're not updating anything.
Correct. You're not touching Joel's code, which would highly upset him, I suspect. Okay. Yeah. So open question. What about the ones on the right? Those little stickies and stuff that you see there. Are those explicit policies? Are those candidates? I'm sorry, what was that, Paul?
I'd say a couple of definition of done and SLA certainly look like policy.
Okay. So in your estimation, this belongs somewhere in here. Okay. Anything else?
So is this like a Scrum ban policy? Because I'm beginning to see the definition of done. I'm beginning to see also that there is an end date, days in progress. Whereas in the Kanban, you have to be constantly updating, and it's timeless. Scrum, you do have a specific time when it needs to start and end.
Okay.
The Scrum is inflexible.
Here I'm going to bust a myth. There is no reason you cannot use Kanban with Scrum.
So it's a Scrum ban.
No.
It's a Kanban. It's a can Scrum.
No, you're using Kanban principle. You can use Kanban principles and practices with a Scrum team.
Okay.
So hold on.
There is a Scrum stop associated with the SLA, right?
You could still have an SLA inside of a sprint, Craig. There's no reason you can't.
No, I know, but I'm just saying with respect to Kanban, an SLA is, when we were talking earlier about a sprint having a start and a stop point, an SLA would drive that in Kanban.
Yes. But again,
in other words, you want to make sure your stories are broken down enough and you understand them enough to meet that SLA.
Yeah.
Why are we assuming that start date and end date are referring to a sprint and not the time that effort was being done on the story?
Yep. Okay. Yep.
So Marcelo, are you suggesting that Kanban board has a cousin that requires people to visualize, to use work in progress, manage flow, maybe understand classes of service, be explicit, and then follow the 4 principles? Are you suggesting that there is something in another framework that is not defined in a Scrum guide that says this is a good set of principles and that, what did you say, principles and practices to use to manage work?
Kind of like you can use extreme programming with Scrum, Ray.
But we don't call it Scrum XP. We just call it
Scrum. Yeah, because Scrum is a container around any practices that you may decide to use.
Mind blowing, Marcelo, mind blowing.
Okay. Yeah. It's a spoiler. It's a spoiler here. Hey, Alan, I see you got your hand up. Hit me.
If it will unmute. So we treat Kanban, its principles and practices, as an agile thing. The way I understand it and the truth of it to me is that Kanban is agnostic toward agile or waterfall or whatever. It is a process improvement and flow technique that you can overlay on any process that exists. or can be contained within a process that exists. So you can overlay Kanban on top of Scrum. You can overlay Kanban on top of Waterfall. You can overlay Kanban on top of your stage gate process that takes 6 months. It's a way to improve whatever process you're using. And so I'm not trying to muddy the waters here, but what I am trying to say is that Kanban, its principles and practices, is amenable to be teamed up with lots of other ways of working. And its intention is to give you visibility into how that way of working is working and what you can do to improve it.
I'm going to delve back into antediluvian agile history. Okay. It has been discussed and was discussed maybe about 18 years ago when the Kanban method was first introduced. Okay, the Kanban method as it existed then is effectively a form of what's called Scrum Type C, which is you plan just enough to get moving, you deliver enough to get feedback to review, okay, and you continuously replan and repull work into your team to keep the spice flowing. Okay. Scrum Type C. If you look on the internet, the Wayback Machine will probably point you to a paper written by Dr. Jeff Sutherland, where he describes different types of Scrum. And what I just described is that Scrum Type C, which is very similar to how the Kanban method itself is defined. Interestingly enough, obviously, the Kanban method has also evolved over time and added things to its credit and stuff, which is good because we want our practices to learn from themselves, right? From how we apply them. So we want them to learn and we want them to evolve. So that's great. Okay. But kind of spoiler alert to this particular slide is they're all explicit policies. So I guess I kind of punked you. I'm sorry. I apologize. I kind of punked you. These are all potential explicit policies that can be built into any particular work item, okay, to help you see, okay, how to make pull decisions. Okay, how to make pull decisions. Okay.
So, Marcelo,
Sir.
when you're talking about explicit policies, are you talking about written policies or are you talking about policies that everybody knows?
C, all the above. The idea here is that everybody should be aware of what they are, so they understand how to apply them, how to use them. Yeah. They're meant to help, not as a cudgel. They're meant to help.
Sure.
Okay? And what's more, they're meant to be worked on collaboratively so that everybody can walk up to someone's Kanban board and make sense. In other words, there's no reason why, if I'm working with Dr. V's team, that someone who comes from Dr. V's team, who's a SME, like you see there, the defenders, should not be able to walk up to our board and have a look at things that might involve them.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. No, I was asking because so a group I recently worked with, and I was actually the designer of this. We made space for what we called implicit policies based on the idea of implicit knowledge in organizations. In other words, we communicated it to each other verbally as opposed to necessarily writing it down every single time in order to maintain a lot more flexibility with things. So there were certain things that we were doing that were not written down anywhere, but we all knew what they were and we could express what they were. And if anybody came in and asked us about them, we'd be happy to tell them what they were. But we just hadn't written them down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so.
Oh, let me ask you a question, Thomas.
Sure.
Do you have a change management process?
We did, and it explicitly included the idea of implicit knowledge.
Okay, but you have something written.
We did, yes. That
Okay.
explicitly allowed for what we were doing. Yes.
Okay, so you're gonna have that is gonna be a policy.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I used to do regulatory affairs for helping companies do FDA regulations. I'm very familiar with policies. But yeah, in our case, because of the flexibility we wanted to achieve, we ensured that, and to get people to make sure that they talk to each other about things, we left some of the stuff implicit, as in not written down.
Yeah, but Thomas, in facilitation class, the instructor made it a point to make this point. If it's not written down, it's like it was never said.
Yes.
Yeah.
So nothing cannot be written down that is a team policy because it's like it was never said.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about what you said, Thomas, because I'm wondering how you handle circumstances of things as implicit policy that may impact the device history file. By the way, folks, I've just delved into some very specific stuff having to do with medical devices. A device history file is basically the Encyclopedia Britannica about your medical device that you must share with the Federal Drug Administration, the Food Drug Administration.
FDA, yep.
Because otherwise they will not approve anything. And it's pretty extensive of a set of documents. Craig, you got a question?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm thinking, when I look at days in progress as it relates to policy, is that a case? Is that there, for instance, I guess you would look at days in progress to make a decision based on how close you are to either an SLA or an end date or a due date? Is that
correct? You could use that days in progress against any of the other four. Correct. Okay. And notice that I put that green sticky, it says developer name. Okay. In that case, I could have done this. Hang on a second. Oh, I could have done this, and I said QA name, dev name, QA name, doc name, blah 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 blah. I left it generic as developer name, okay? Because in this case, and I am thinking of a very specific case when I put this example together, okay, of who last touched this thing.
Yep.
Who last touched this thing? And in this case, basically, we'd had these little magnetic avatars, okay? And I know you know all about that, Mr. Sarnak. Okay, is he still here or did he have to leave? I'm not sure. I don't see him. Well, yeah, here he is. There
I'm still here.
You know all about these little magnetic avatars, okay? Our team would specify who last was touching this ruddy thing. So we put that on there. Alan, I see your hand. I recognize your hand. Sorry I made you wait.
No, it's fine. I just wanted clarification that all of these things that are policies, representations of policies, these are possible policies. They're not things that we would expect every single story to have in every single company in the whole world.
Exactamundo. They're meant to be elaborated collaboratively.
Right.
These are all ideas, okay, looking at the spectrum of decisioning. The idea is for you to create your own decision library. And by the way, I'm going to shamelessly repeat that, Alan, from now to eternity.
Okay, good.
So it's all your fault if you ever hear me say that in another conference talk.
Yeah,
okay.
I just wanted to be explicit that, for example, if I'm on a team that tracking the end date gives me no value, I don't need to track the end date. You were just giving an example of something that might be a policy, but I don't need to follow.
Absolutely. all these are for you, and by you I mean whoever's establishing those policies to determine. The one thing that I will say hard and fast is that everybody should have an understanding of clearly, if you're using a particular policy of any of this sort, that everybody should know what it means and what it's used for. Everybody should know what it means and what it's used for. What am I looking at and what does it mean to us?
Should they also know why we're doing it?
It's always important to know the why, Bob. Always important to know the why. Absolutely. You can't divest the two of those or the three of those from each other. What does it mean to us? Why are we using it? Why is it important? Okay. Cool. I had some other examples of what policies might make sense to teams, and I thought we would have time maybe to play a game, but I don't think we're going to have time to play this because it would take us way past the end of the time box that we have for the meetup. So maybe for another time. I was going to ask you guys to see, now that we've explored policies together, looking at, and I was going to give you a scenario of some teams and actually a couple of different Kanban boards of, what kind of policies might make sense for you, and have you guys kind of discuss making policies up for yourselves. But maybe we'll do that another time. Yeah, because I don't think we're going to have time to play the game. So before I give it back to Nelu, I just have one question. Do you think we've had a polite enough conversation about policies? Thank you, Jason.
Yes.
I would say so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I didn't hear confrontation. I think it was a good presentation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Part of me wonders if maybe you could have been a little less polite, but it was well balanced.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I should have put a slide together with the local constabulary here involved in this traffic situation. Yeah. Maybe if I'd put in a police car in there, maybe we'd see.
So the question there, Marcelo, would be, what is the correct policy and what is the expected policy in South Florida?
The expected policy is you let them go.
Yeah.
You might do a Thomas and have some choice words for the person. Okay, I don't begrudge them. You might have some choice words for the person, but you let them go. Car insurance is way too expensive in South Florida as it is, I think.
It's like do not confront anybody.
Well, there's other reasons we won't go into for that.
Just let it go. Just let it go. Cool.
Yep.
So any Q&A, just open the floor. Any questions? Any questions? We can go back and review anything here before I give it back to Nelu.
So, Marcelo, real quick, just to double check and make sure that I'm understanding. And when you're saying, when we're discussing a Kanban, which is in Japanese supposed to be a billboard or a signboard, it's really a decision library that's going to hold and provide explicit policy information that will include things that mean something for us and the reason why we need it. In other words, in my own words, I'm conceptualizing this in my own words. So that next time I hear someone say, tell me what you think about Kanban, instead of getting into the all university part in detail, short and sweet.
it doesn't rock my head. It doesn't rock my head too much about it. There was something in there that I wasn't too sure on how you arrived there per se. But it doesn't rock my head. Okay. What I will say is this, is that in a Kanban system, anybody interacting with a Kanban system should be able to discern, okay, if they are working in that Kanban system, they should be able to discern if something requires their attention, and if they are available to give it attention, that they should recognize what decisions are in front of them to consider.
Okay. Yeah, because basically in the board, you will be able to see if there's any type of choke points or bottlenecks. So is that what you're saying? You were referring to that? If there's
You could discern it if you understand enough about the current and historical states of that Kanban system. You may not necessarily see that there's a choke point if, for example, if something is at the work in progress limit or work in process limit, that in and of itself does not detail a bottleneck.
right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that itself does not give you enough data, but it gives you enough of an indicator to go ask.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Okay.
And basically, and when you're asking is because there's implicit information that is not available.
Well, the idea, what's missing is the visualization of the metrics,
right?
Which we did not discuss today. That's why I said current and historical state of the Kanban system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because all this stuff is going to generate metrics, which is maybe fodder for a different conversation at a later point in time. Okay. But that would be the only thing that I would say the next thing that you might potentially go look at and have a conversation around is what has been the behavior of the system up until this point that I walked up to it.
There you go.
If I was not present for it, because I would turn around the question on you and say, well, if you've been present, where's your attention been?
But there's been implicit information that I lost, that I missed.
Yes. Yep.
There you go.
Yep. Exactly. Cool.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. These are wonderful questions, folks. I really appreciate them.
So,
and again, I want to give a shout out before Nelu stops the recording to my friend Alan there. I hope I did him proud, number one. And number two, I hope he liked us as a community enough that he's willing to come back and maybe share of his experience too. Okay. I don't say that lightly, folks.